On the quiet shores of Khobar, where happiness gathered to write the beginning of a new story, Youssef smiled as he held his bride Maryam's hand, surrounded by his loved ones, on what seemed to be the happiest day of his life. But that joy lasted only for minutes. Suddenly he collapsed, pressing his hand against his chest, his eyes locked on Maryam's as if they carried a secret he couldn't reveal before leaving this world forever. Just a few short minutes separated him from being a husband to leaving behind a young widow, and for his 8-year-old daughter Salma to lose her only source of strength. Why did Youssef choose to get married knowing that death was approaching? What was the mystery behind the black briefcase he carried in the days before his wedding? And who was the mysterious man in the black cloak who appeared at his funeral, leaving behind a short note that read, "The promise has been fulfilled"? A story of love, sacrifice, and secrets buried deep beneath the sands of the Arabian Gulf, where you will discover how a single heart can save an entire family, and how the truth can never stay hidden no matter how much time passes. Follow Tales and Secrets, and don't forget to support us by subscribing, liking, and telling us where you're watching from. The afternoon sun in Khobar painted the sea with a deep golden hue, and the soft sound of waves contrasted with the joyful music echoing from a small, improvised wedding hall on the beach. Youssef, a 39-year-old man with a face shaped by years of salt and wind, wore his best white thobe, borrowed from his brother, and smiled as if he had triumphed over all of life's battles. Beside him stood Maryam, the bride, her eyes calm and her simple dress glowing in the sunlight as she held his hand tightly. The guests, neighbors, fishermen, and a few relatives looked on with genuine happiness. Among them was a young girl with dark brown hair and large, curious eyes, watching everything with quiet worry. Salma, Youssef's 8-year-old daughter, held a small jasmine flower, waiting for the perfect moment to hand it to her father. The officiant had just announced the couple as husband and wife when Youssef knelt before his daughter, took the flower from her tiny hand, and kissed her forehead. The simple gesture brought smiles to everyone's faces, unaware that it would be the last time his daughter would ever feel the warmth of her father's touch.
Everyone was smiling, their laughter blending with the sound of the waves, until, within seconds, Youssef's smile vanished. His body trembled, his face turned pale, and he clutched his chest. The hall fell into sudden silence. Maryam grabbed him, panicked, her voice breaking as she screamed for help. Youssef tried to speak, but no words came out. His eyes fixed on Salma, steady and filled with sorrow, as if he were trying to memorize her face one last time. "Daddy!" Salma cried, running toward him, tears streaming down her small cheeks. "Don't leave me, Daddy!" Everyone froze, shock and fear spreading like wildfire. Some men rushed forward trying to help, while the women broke into loud cries and prayers. "God have mercy on him! God have mercy on him!" Voices echoed through the hall. "Get a doctor!" one of the guests shouted, fumbling for his phone in desperation. Maryam's hands trembled as she held Youssef's. "Youssef, please don't leave us," she whispered, her voice shattered. You promised me a new life." It was a scene beyond heartbreak. In the very moment that was meant to mark a new beginning, everything turned into a nightmare. The candlelight that had been meant to illuminate their celebration now cast dark, haunting shadows across the faces of the guests. A retired nurse from the neighborhood rushed forward, attempting CPR, but it was useless. Youssef's eyes flickered weakly, as if he were trying to say something important, something he didn't have time to reveal. "Take Salma away!" cried one of the elderly women, trying to shield the child from the horrific sight. "She shouldn't see this."
But Salma refused to move. She clung tightly to her father's hand, sobbing, "Daddy, wake up! You promised to take me to the amusement park tomorrow. Daddy, please!" Among the guests stood a mysterious man in the shadows, watching the scene with cold, expressionless eyes. He didn't move to help, didn't show a hint of emotion. He wore a luxurious black cloak and rolled a string of prayer beads between his fingers. A faint, knowing smile crossed his face before he disappeared into the chaos. Seconds dragged on like hours. The sound of the sea in the background no longer whispered softly. It now cried, mournful and heavy. The golden light of the setting sun faded slowly, wrapping the entire scene in the color of sorrow. The light slowly faded, leaving the place wrapped in deepening darkness. In those cursed moments, Maryam suddenly remembered Youssef's strange words from just a few days earlier. "If something ever happens to me," he had said, his voice unusually serious, "take care of Salma as if she were your own daughter, and keep the black box under my bed safe. Don't open it unless you ever feel in danger." At the time, Maryam hadn't understood what he meant. She thought it was just the anxious talk of a man about to get married. But now, as she looked at his pale, lifeless face, a chilling thought crept into her mind. Did he know? Did he somehow foresee this tragic end? Only minutes after the wedding began, as his body still lay motionless on the floor, the sound of distant seagulls mixed with cries of despair around him. The fisherman everyone respected, the man whose laughter once filled this shore, took his final breath, without anyone knowing why. Maryam held Salma's trembling hand, both staring at Youssef's still body. "We'll find the truth," she whispered softly, almost to herself. "I promise you, Youssef, we'll find out what really happened."
As darkness wrapped the beach and the sea continued its endless rhythm, there was an unmistakable feeling that this wasn't the end of the story, but only its beginning. The beginning of a journey that would uncover buried secrets and hidden truths capable of changing everyone's lives forever. That night, it wasn't only Maryam and Salma's tears that fell. It was as if the sky itself was weeping. Gentle raindrops began to fall, blending with the waves of the sea, as though nature itself mourned the tragedy that had struck this quiet shore. And somewhere, far from the eyes of everyone, the man in the black cloak stood in silence. He pulled a small photograph from his pocket, a photo of Youssef smiling, and whispered in a low, cold voice, "The promise has been kept, and the price has been paid." The morning that followed was unusually cold in Khobar. Even the sea seemed to hold its breath in sorrow. The townspeople gathered at the old pier, the same place where Youssef used to return every evening, his nets full of shining fish and stories from the sea. That morning, there was something else resting on the pier. Youssef's body, wrapped in a white shroud, ready for his final journey. Maryam, her hair tangled and her eyes swollen from crying, clung tightly to her father's cold hand, refusing to let go. Her grandmother tried gently to pull her away, but the child whispered stubbornly through her broken voice, "Daddy will wake up. He's just sleeping. Can't you see?" Beside her stood Maryam, dressed in a simple black abaya, trying with all her strength to hold back her tears under the sharp gaze of the villagers. Their eyes pierced her like arrows, filled with suspicion and unspoken questions. "He got married today and dies the same day," whispered an old woman to her neighbor, her voice low but loud enough to wound Maryam's heart. "God only knows what happened," the other replied, adjusting her black headscarf. They say she only wanted to be the wife of a respected fisherman. Maybe there was something in the coffee she served him." A lump formed in Maryam's throat, but she couldn't respond. How could she explain that Youssef was the only man who had ever seen her for who she really was, despite her past? How could she defend herself on the very day she was burying him? Among the mourners, a figure stood out, a man wearing a luxurious black cloak, the same man who had appeared at the wedding. He stood apart from the crowd, watching with sharp, unblinking eyes that never left Maryam. He didn't weep, nor did he whisper a prayer like the others. Instead, he slowly rolled his prayer beads between his fingers, each movement deliberate, almost as if he were counting the seconds. "Who is that man?" Maryam asked her neighbor, Fadl, in a low voice. Fadl glanced quickly, and turned her face away as if afraid he might notice. "Ibrahim el-Dakhri, a merchant from Riyadh. I didn't even know Youssef knew him." Before Maryam could ask more, the burial began. The men lifted Youssef's body as Salma's piercing scream broke the silence. "No, don't take Daddy," she cried, running toward the coffin, tripping over her small dress before Maryam caught her in her arms, struggling to hold the shaking child close. Maryam fought to hold back her tears as Salma's small voice broke through the heavy silence. "Daddy promised me," she sobbed, her face buried in Maryam's dress. "He promised he'd teach me how to catch the big fish this week. He said I'd become the best fisher in Khobar." Maryam felt her heart shatter. She had only known Youssef for a short time, just 6 months since she'd moved into the neighborhood, but she'd seen how deeply he loved his daughter, how he'd carry her on his shoulders returning from the sea as her laughter filled the air, how he'd sit with her on their modest balcony at night, pointing at the stars and teaching her their names one by one. After Youssef was laid to rest in the nearby cemetery, the people slowly began to disperse, leaving the place to its quiet sadness. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks filled the air, like a mournful rhythm marking the end of a chapter. Maryam and Salma stood until the very end, hand in hand, facing the fresh mound of earth. "What will we do now?" Salma asked softly, her frightened eyes searching Maryam's face for answers. Maryam didn't know what to say. Salma was her only relative in Dammam, and now, less than 24 hours after her wedding, she was a widow, suddenly responsible for a child that wasn't hers by blood. Yet she gently squeezed Salma's hand. "We'll stay together," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "That's what your father would have wanted." As they prepared to leave, Maryam noticed that the mysterious man, Ibrahim, was still there, standing at a distance, watching them silently. For a moment, their eyes met, and a cold shiver ran down her spine.
There was something in his gaze, not sadness, not sympathy, but something that felt like anticipation, as if he were waiting for something. Then, with a sudden, deliberate motion, Ibrahim walked toward them. He stopped a few steps away, bent down, and placed a small envelope at Maryam's feet. Without a word, he turned and walked away, disappearing among the gravestones, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and an unsettling feeling that lingered in the air. Maryam looked down at the envelope, hesitant. It was plain white, no name, no mark. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she bent down, picked it up, and opened it. Inside was a single torn piece of paper, with uneven handwriting scrawled across it. She read it once, then again. The words made no sense. "The promise has been kept." Her heart raced. What promise? And who was this man who seemed to know everything Youssef never had the chance to say? The little girl's eyes widened with curiosity. "What does it say, Aunt Maryam?" Salma asked, trying to peek at the folded paper. Maryam quickly hid the note, forcing a faint smile. "Just condolences, sweetheart. Come on, let's go home before the sun sets." As they walked back, the fading light painted the waters of the gulf in hues of gold and crimson. But Maryam's heart felt heavy. Something about that marriage didn't make sense. The thought lingered like a shadow in her chest. Youssef had been hiding something he never got the chance to tell her. That night, after Salma had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from crying, Maryam sat alone in the small kitchen. Her untouched cup of tea had gone cold. The letter lay on the table in front of her, the same short message. "The promise has been fulfilled." Beside it, her wedding ring, a simple silver band that had graced her finger for barely a day. "What were you hiding, Youssef? And what will this secret cost me?" From the next room, Salma's voice broke the silence, soft and frightened, murmuring in her sleep, "Baba, don't go. The bad man is coming." Maryam froze. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. She rushed to the window, half expecting to see someone standing out there in the dark. But there was no one, only the swaying shadows of palm trees, the sea breeze whispering through them, and the distant call to prayer mixing with the low murmur of the waves. Something had begun that night, something much bigger than she could comprehend. Deep down, Maryam knew this wasn't the end of Youssef's story. It was only the beginning. 2 days passed after the burial. Maryam hadn't slept a full night since. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Youssef, standing on a distant shore, trying to speak, his words swept away by the wind. And behind him, always, that dark silhouette, moving closer each time. On the morning of the 3rd day, while preparing tea in her small kitchen, a soft knock came at the door. Startled, she opened it cautiously and found Fidel, the old fisherman and Youssef's longtime friend, standing there. He looked frail, his weathered hands holding his worn cap respectfully. "Good morning, Sister Maryam," he greeted quietly, his voice carrying both warmth and grief. "May I have a few words with you?" Maryam invited him inside. The small living room was filled with the scent of sea salt and silence. On the wall hung a photo of Youssef, smiling that familiar, confident smile, his eyes glimmering with life. "Please, Uncle Fidel, sit down. Would you like some tea?" "Thank you, my daughter," he said, nodding gratefully as he settled onto the mat. His eyes avoided the picture on the wall. When she handed him the tea and sat opposite him, Maryam noticed the tremor in his hands as he lifted the cup. He was breathing heavily, as though weighed down by something he'd carried for too long. "Maryam," he began finally, after a long sip of tea, his voice trembled. "I've been feeling uneasy, and I think you deserve to know something." Maryam straightened in her seat, her heart tightening. "What is it, Uncle Fadl?" He hesitated, his eyes darting to the floor as if weighing every word. "A few days before the wedding, 3 days to be exact, I saw Youssef doing something strange."
Maryam frowned. "Strange? What do you mean?" "It was late at night," Fidel continued, "around midnight. I just returned from a fishing trip, and the port was nearly empty. Then I saw him, Youssef, talking to someone near his boat. At first I thought nothing of it, but then I realized he was selling it." "Selling his boat?" Maryam's voice rose in shock. "But that boat was his only source of income. How would he feed himself and Salma?" Fidel sighed deeply. "He sold it to Abdul Majid al-Tamimi, a merchant from Dhahran. The man paid him a large sum, all in cash." He paused, lowering his gaze. But that's not the strange part, he added in a shaken whisper. About an hour later, I saw Youssef again, with another man, a man wearing an elegant black bisht. Maryam felt a chill crawl down her spine. A man with a black bisht? Was he older, with white hair and narrow eyes? Fadel nodded slowly. Yes, I didn't want to interrupt them, so I kept my distance, but Youssef looked nervous, uneasy. I watched him hand the man a thick envelope. Maryam closed her eyes for a moment, trying to piece together what she'd just heard. Why would he sell his boat? And why give the money to that man? Before she could ask more, a soft, tired voice cut through the heavy silence. Paba. Salma stood in the doorway, her small figure fragile and pale, eyes still swollen from crying. Good morning, Uncle Fadel. Good morning, my little flower, Fadel said gently, forcing a smile, though his heart ached at the sight of her. Salma sat between them, fidgeting with the hem of her dress, then looked up suddenly. Uncle Fadel, do you know who the bad man is? The air in the room seemed to freeze. Fadel and Maryam exchanged a tense glance before turning back to the child. What bad man, sweetheart? Maryam asked softly, masking her anxiety. The one Baba was afraid of, she replied innocently, eyes fixed on the floor. I heard him talking about him on the phone. He said he'd do what the man asked, but after that, he wanted him to leave us alone. Fadel straightened, the color draining from his face. When did you hear this, Salma? She frowned, trying to remember. A few days before the wedding. I pretended to be asleep because it was late, but I was awake. I heard Baba leave the house. I followed him to the balcony and saw him walking away with a black bag. Her voice grew quieter. He came back at dawn. He looked so tired, and there was a scratch on his face. A black bag? Fadel repeated under his breath, turning sharply towards Maryam. Have you seen a bag like that here? Maryam shook her head. No, I haven't. He didn't bring much with him. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the soft ticking of the old wall clock and the rustle of curtains swaying with the sea breeze. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the secret lingering among them. Maryam said gently, placing her hand on the girl's shoulder, Did your father ask you not to tell anyone what you heard? The little girl nodded slowly. He said it was our secret, that he was doing it to protect us, but he didn't protect us. He left us. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she shook with silent sobs. Maryam pulled her close, holding her tightly. No, sweetheart, she said, her voice gentle. Yes, she replied briefly, before quickly changing the subject. Uncle Fadel, was there a store near your house with a big blue sign? Yes, there was. Maryam followed her lead. That's where I used to buy my groceries. What's beside it? A bakery and a tailor shop next door. A noisy screeching sound broke through the quiet. Maryam jolted to her feet. A rusty metal truck parked abruptly by the curb. A small man in a dirty uniform hopped out and started unloading boxes. Maryam breathed a sigh of relief. But 3 more days passed, and each sunrise brought more unease. The narrow streets of the fisherman's quarter seemed quieter than usual. Neighbors who once stopped to greet her now averted their eyes as she walked by. Even the shopkeeper on the corner, whose laughter used to echo down the street, fell silent when she approached to buy bread and milk. On the 4th morning, as Maryam helped Salma get ready for school, she noticed a sleek black car parked across the street. Its windows were tinted, hiding whoever sat inside. But Maryam could see the faint outline of someone in the back seat, watching. Come on, Salma, we'll be late, she said quickly, trying to keep her voice steady. She grabbed the girl's hand a little too tightly and hurried her in the opposite direction of the car. When she returned home after dropping Salma off, the car was gone. She exhaled slowly, relief mixing uneasily with suspicion. Still,
The feeling didn't leave her. All day long, she couldn't shake the sense that eyes were following her. From the corners, from the alleys, from somewhere she couldn't see. At the market, she kept glancing over her shoulder, expecting to find someone behind her. But every time she turned, there was no one. By afternoon, as she hung laundry on the rooftop, she froze. Down on the corner of the street stood a man, the same man she had seen at the funeral. Ibrahim al-Zahiri. His dark sunglasses hid his expression, but his posture gave him away. He pretended to read a newspaper, yet his posture was too focused, too deliberate. He was watching the house. Maryam's breath caught in her throat. She hurriedly pulled down the drying clothes, rushed inside, and locked the door behind her. Her heart pounded violently as she pressed her back to the door, forcing herself to breathe.
What did this man want? Why was he following her? That night, after Salma had fallen asleep, Maryam sat alone in the dimly lit kitchen. She had gone through all of Youssef's belongings again and again, but there was still no sign of the black bag Salma had mentioned. Had he hidden it somewhere else? Or had it vanished, along with the secrets he took to his grave? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sound. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps on the front door. Then silence. Then 2 more knocks. Maryam's stomach clenched. No one ever visited this late. She rose cautiously, every step toward the door echoing in the quiet house. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the handle, her mind racing with one question. Who could it be at this hour? If there had been a magic eye, Maryam thought, it would have revealed who stood outside. From the shadows, a deep, firm voice called out, trembling slightly. "Open the door, Maryam." Her blood ran cold. How did he know Salma was asleep? And how did he even know her name? "Who are you?" she demanded, raising her voice slightly and placing her hand on the door's latch. "Ibrahim al-Dahari," the man replied. "I have information about your husband. Important information." Maryam hesitated. It was dangerous to open the door to a stranger at this hour, especially after everything she had heard about him. But if he truly had knowledge about Youssef, how could she know he was telling the truth? She reached for a kitchen knife from the nearby drawer, hiding it behind her back. A nervous sigh came from outside. "I'm the only person who knows why Youssef died, the only one who knows what he was involved in, and the only one who can protect you and Salma now." After a long moment of indecision, Maryam opened the door just a crack, keeping the chain secured. Through the narrow opening, she saw a tall man in his 40s, with black hair streaked with gray and sharp eyes under thick eyebrows. He wore an elegant robe and sunglasses, though night had fallen hours ago. "What do you want?" she asked, gripping the knife tightly. Ibrahim raised his hand slowly, calmly. "I am unarmed, and I am not here to hurt you. I'm a retired police officer," he said, removing his sunglasses to reveal deep brown eyes. "I've been following a major case, a case Youssef became involved in during the final days before his death." Maryam exhaled deeply, loosening the chain to fully open the door, but she remained in the entrance, unwilling to let him step inside. "What kind of case?" she asked. "A case far bigger than you can imagine, but it's not safe to discuss it here. Did you know your house has been under surveillance since Youssef's death?" A chill ran down Maryam's spine. Dangerous people. People who used Youssef, and when he was no longer useful, abandoned him. Are you saying they killed him?" she whispered, her face paling. He lowered his voice. "No,
Youssef wasn't just a fisherman. He was working with me, helping me investigate a criminal network operating in the region. He was very close to exposing the head of the operation before he died. Maryam felt dizzy, leaning against the doorframe, trying to absorb what she was hearing. Youssef, the simple fisherman she had known, involved in a secret investigation? Why was Ibrahim telling her this now? Ibrahim reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, shining object, a tiny gold earring shaped like a crescent moon. He placed it gently into Maryam's trembling hand. He had done all of this for this.
Maryam stared at the earring, confused. What is this? It's not for me, not for Salma. What does this have to do with Youssef? Listen carefully, Maryam, Ibrahim said, stepping closer so that his face was illuminated by the faint light at the doorway. For the first time, she noticed an old scar stretching from below his left eye to the corner of his mouth. Youssef was hiding a lot from you. He was involved in something far bigger than any of us could imagine. You must be extremely careful in the days ahead. Maryam looked at the small gold earring in her shaking hand, trying to understand its significance, its connection. Ibrahim smiled faintly, enigmatically. You'll discover that for yourself, but know this: Youssef was willing to sacrifice his life for it. Before Maryam could ask another question, the sound of an engine cut through the night. A car approached rapidly. Ibrahim snapped his head toward the street, his expression suddenly tense. "I have to go now," he said abruptly. "I'll return when it's safe." He looked directly into Maryam's eyes. "Trust no one, speak to no one about this, and find the black bag. All the answers are there." Then, with astonishing speed for a man of his size, he disappeared into the darkness, leaving Maryam standing at the doorway, the small golden crescent earring gleaming in her hand under the faint moonlight. She quickly closed and secured the door, then slowly sank to the floor, leaning against it. She held the earring, murmuring to it, her mind racing. What were you doing, Youssef? And what secret did you hide in that precious chest in the bedroom? From the adjacent room, she heard Salma turning in her sleep, mumbling incomprehensible words. Maryam stood carefully, slipping the earring into her pocket before walking quietly to the child's room. She stood in the doorway, watching the little girl. The child Youssef had promised to protect, and now Maryam's responsibility. "I will uncover the truth," Maryam promised silently, brushing away a tear. "For you and for Youssef, no matter the cost." Outside, the moon hid behind clouds, and the sea whispered its eternal secrets. Somewhere in the darkness, unseen eyes watched the small house, waiting for her next move. Over the following days, whispers began to spread through the fishermen's neighborhood like wildfire. At the fish market, where the women gathered each morning, stories twisted and grew with each retelling. Khalid, the elderly woman with a face as wrinkled as dry dates, stood at the center of an eager circle of listeners, her voice rising and falling with dramatic rhythm. "I heard from my cousin who works at King Fahd Hospital that the coroner found traces of poison in Youssef's body." Her words carried a harsh certainty, though the truth was there had been no autopsy.
"They say that strange widow from Dammam only wanted his little house and compensation from the fisherman's fund. Subhanallah," the women murmured among themselves, exchanging calculated glances. "How can someone be so cruel?" "And that's not all," added Saad, joining in. "I heard Youssef was drowning in debt to the wealthy merchant from Dhahran. Maybe his marriage to her was a desperate attempt to escape." At the corner of the market, Fadl stood silently, eyes narrowing in disbelief. She had known Youssef since he was a boy running along the shore, had watched him grow into an honorable man, a loving father. Yet she did not dare speak up. Words against the current only bring trouble for the speaker. Meanwhile, at the girls' elementary school, Salma faced a different kind of cruelty. During recess, while the other girls played, Salma sat alone on a weathered wooden bench, tracing invisible shapes in the dust with her fingers. "Look," whispered Noura, the daughter of the wealthy fabric merchant, speaking loudly on purpose. "That's the fisherman's daughter whose father died on his wedding day. My father says her new stepmother poisoned him in his tea." Salma's eyes widened, her lower lip trembling. She didn't cry. She had used up all her tears over the long nights before. "That's a lie," she suddenly declared, her tiny fists clenched at her sides. "Aunt Maryam loved my father. She wouldn't hurt him." Noura laughed harshly, surrounded by her followers mimicking every movement. "Ask anyone in the neighborhood, everyone knows the truth. Your father was in debt, and she only wanted his house." Salma's face twisted with anger, and before anyone could react, she rushed forward and shoved Noura hard. The girl staggered and fell to the ground. The other girl's eyes went wide with shock before screams erupted through the playground. An hour later, Maryam was sitting in the principal's office holding Salma's trembling hand as they listened to a harsh reprimand about unacceptable aggressive behavior. "We understand the difficult circumstances, but that does not justify violence." Salma was suspended for 2 days. On the walk home, Maryam and Salma moved through a heavy silence. The sun beat down mercilessly, but it was nothing compared to the accusing looks from every corner of the neighborhood. "Why do they say such terrible things about you, Aunt Maryam?" Salma asked finally, in a small, broken voice. Maryam knelt to meet her niece's eyes. "Listen, Salma. People say many things when they don't understand. They make up stories to fill the gaps in their knowledge. What matters is what we know in our hearts." She placed her hand over Salma's small chest. "Do you think I hurt your father?" Salma shook her head vehemently. "No, father was happy with you. He smiled a lot."
Maryam gave a sad smile. "That's all that matters. We know the truth, and one day we will uncover what really happened to your father. I promise you." When they returned home, Maryam was surprised to see Fadl waiting at the door, leaning on his wooden cane, his face lined with worry. "Thank God for your safety," he sighed in relief. After Maryam brought Salma inside and gave her a book to look through, she stepped back out to speak with Fadl. "The situation is becoming difficult, Uncle Fadl," she whispered. "Rumors are spreading everywhere. Some say I poisoned Youssef. Others say he was in debt. I don't know what to do." Fadl shook his head slowly. "People fear what they don't understand and fill that fear with stories," he said, glancing around cautiously. "But there's something else I wanted to tell you. I saw the same man in the black cloak arguing sharply with Youssef's brother yesterday near the port." Maryam felt her heart race. Ibrahim Dahari. Yes, that was him. As she tried to absorb this information, her mind jumped back to Ibrahim's words about the black bag. She had searched the house, under the beds, in cupboards, behind furniture, but found nothing. "Uncle Fadl, do you know if Youssef had special hiding places for his important things?" she asked. He paused, nervously playing with his brown prayer beads. "Youssef was always careful, but I remember him telling me once he made a secret compartment in the bedroom floor. He said it was the only place he trusted to keep his mother's photos safe." After Fadl left, Maryam returned inside and began examining the bedroom floor meticulously. Salma had fallen asleep on the living room sofa, exhausted from the day. Maryam ran her fingers along the wooden planks, feeling for anything unusual. She hadn't spent much time in this room, always respecting Youssef's privacy. After nearly half an hour of careful searching, she finally found what she was looking for – a wooden panel that looked identical to the others but shifted slightly when pressed. With trembling fingers, she lifted it to reveal a small black leather bag hidden in the dark. The bag felt heavy, almost like a ticking bomb. It was locked with a small clasp.
She searched the hiding place and found a tiny key wrapped in cloth. With a pounding heart, she unlocked it and opened the bag. Inside, she found a collection of old photographs, a stack of papers, a thick envelope, and a small object wrapped in silk. She took the photos first and felt an electric shock run through her body.
They were pictures of her, Maryam, with a man she had not seen in years, Nasser al-Saleh, her first love and the father of the child she never had. One photo showed them standing on a beach in Dammam, embracing. This was 9 years ago, before he disappeared, leaving her alone, heartbroken, and with a reputation scarred by society. But why were these photos in Youssef's possession? How had he obtained them, and how did this connect to his sudden death? With shaking hands, she unwrapped the silk bundle, revealing a small golden earring, identical to the one Ibrahim had given her. Suddenly, everything clicked into place in her mind, forming a picture clearer than she had dared hope. Ibrahim's words, "He did all of this for this." At the bottom of the bag, she found a thick envelope. Opening it, she discovered official documents bearing seals and signatures. Some names were familiar, including Abdul Majid al-Tamimi, the merchant who had bought Youssef's boat. As Maryam read the papers, blood seemed to freeze in her veins. This was not just a sheet of paper, it was proof of a major crime, evidence that could implicate powerful people. At that moment, Maryam finally understood why Youssef had died, and also realized that she and Salma could be the next targets. The network operated through internationally forbidden channels, and worse, it exploited poor fishermen like Youssef, threatening them with losing their only source of income if they refused. Abdul Majid al-Tamimi, seemingly a respectable merchant, was one of the masterminds, and behind him were names of powerful figures in the region, including high-ranking government officials. As dawn broke and the sky shifted from pitch black to a faint gray, then to a soft pink, Maryam heard a quiet knock at the back door. She quickly hid the documents beneath the cushion of the sofa where she had been sitting and moved cautiously toward the door. From outside, a voice whispered, "Heart pounding, Maryam, open quickly." She opened the door to find Ibrahim Dahari standing there, pale and disheveled, as though he had spent the night outdoors. "Did you find the bag?" he asked immediately, skipping any greeting. Maryam nodded slowly. "Yes, and the documents." "No time to explain," Ibrahim cut in sharply. "We have to move now. There are men looking for you. I saw them at the entrance of the neighborhood just minutes ago." Maryam felt blood run cold in her veins. "Who were these men?" "The Tamimi men," Ibrahim said. "They know the bag is with you, and they will stop at nothing to get it." Salma looked toward her bedroom terrified. "What do we do?" "Only what's necessary," Ibrahim replied. "We have 5 minutes at most." Maryam ran to Salma's room and gently shook her awake. "Sweetheart, wake up. We have to go now." The child's eyes opened slowly, confused by the sudden alarm. "What happened, Aunt Maryam?" "We're going on a little trip," Maryam said, forcing calm into her voice. "Hurry, put on your clothes." While Salma dressed, Maryam packed essential clothes and belongings into a small bag, then placed the black bag and the documents into a backpack. Ibrahim had been watching from outside, scanning the street. "Move quickly, I saw a black car approaching slowly from this direction," he warned. They exited through the back door and moved quickly along a narrow alley between houses, then crossed a small field until they reached a back street where Ibrahim's old car waited. "Where are we going?" Maryam asked as she helped Salma into the back seat. "To a safe place in Dammam.
I have a friend there who can hide you for a few days while we figure out what to do with the documents, Ibrahim replied, starting the car. As they drove through the early streets of Khobar, where only fishermen had begun their day, Maryam noticed Ibrahim's unusual tension. His hands shook on the wheel, and his eyes constantly shifted between the road and the rearview mirror.
"There's something else, isn't there?" Maryam asked quietly, so Salma wouldn't hear. Ibrahim glanced at her for a moment, then returned his gaze to the road. "Yes, there's something I haven't told you about Youssef, and about you." Maryam took a deep breath, bracing herself for the bitter truth she knew was coming. "Tell me," she whispered. "When I began investigating the illegal fishing network," Ibrahim said slowly, "I was looking for an insider, someone who knew the details and could gather evidence. Youssef was the only one who agreed." Maryam's heart jumped. Why him? There were dozens of fishermen. Ibrahim paused, weighing his words, because that network had already destroyed the life of someone you cared about from your past. Her pulse raced. "Nasser al-Saleh?" "Yes," Ibrahim confirmed. "Nasser was working with me. He had uncovered some evidence against Tamimi and his associates, but they found out and tried to kill him. They would have done the same to Youssef if he hadn't agreed to help. And now," his voice trailed as he glanced at the road, tense. "To disappear, to change his identity and escape the kingdom." Suddenly, Maryam remembered. How had Nasser vanished 9 years ago without explanation, leaving her alone, carrying his child, heartbroken, and her reputation in ruins? Why hadn't he told her? Why hadn't he taken her with him? "To protect you," Ibrahim's voice was quiet, heavy with truth. "He knew they would hunt him, and if they had discovered your relationship, they would have killed you and your child as well." Maryam felt a shock run through her body. "My child? But I lost the baby in the 3rd month." Ibrahim shook his head slowly. "That's what they told you at the hospital. But the truth is different. You gave birth to a healthy little girl, but they took her from you while you were under the influence of the drugs. They told you she had died. It was all part of a deal with Tamimi. He wanted to silence Nasser forever, and took his daughter as leverage." "My daughter?" Maryam whispered, tears finally breaking free after years of holding them back. "Where is she? Who took her?" Ibrahim glanced at the rearview mirror, his eyes meeting Salma's, who was looking back at them curiously. Maryam's eyes widened in absolute shock. "No, it can't be. Salma! What? My daughter!" Maryam's mind raced. The little girl she had believed was the child of her late husband was in fact Nasser's daughter. Maryam looked at the child in the back seat, her heart pounding as she saw Nasser's eyes, that distinctive jawline, that shy smile. How had this ended up with Youssef? She was given to a family in Riyadh at first, and once things had settled, Tamimi arranged to transfer her to Youssef, who had just lost his wife. It was their way of keeping her close and under watch. Youssef didn't know the truth at first, but he discovered it by accident a few months ago when he saw her in the market. "That's why he decided to marry you?" Maryam asked as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in her mind. Yes, he had wanted to reunite a mother with her daughter without raising any suspicion. He knew that confronting Tamimi directly would be dangerous, so he planned every step with care. He had intended to tell you the truth after the wedding, when you were safe in his home, and after you had gathered all the evidence. But why did they kill him on our wedding day? "Because they discovered his plan," Ibrahim said, his voice calm yet heavy. "They realized he was collecting evidence against them, and they had to stop him before he could reveal the truth, before you knew that Salma was your daughter." Maryam paused, eyes wide, and then remembered the message. The promise has been fulfilled. Ibrahim looked at her with sorrowful eyes. Before he died, Youssef had confronted Tamimi with what he had discovered. A deal had been offered, silence about the network and the truth of Salma in exchange for your safety and hers. But he also had to protect a family secret belonging to you. "What secret?" Maryam whispered, trying to process the weight of it all.
"Youssef discovered that your father, who died 20 years ago, had been involved in founding this network. He had been Tamini's partner before being assassinated by rivals. That secret could have destroyed your family's reputation forever." Maryam fell silent, her hands trembling as she tried to absorb everything. Everything had been a lie: her life, her past, even the loss of her child. And Youssef, the simple fisherman, had sacrificed his life to return her daughter and shield her from a truth that would have destroyed her. She whispered, glancing at Salma, asleep in the back seat, "He died to keep us safe, to give me a chance to reclaim my daughter." Yes, and that's why we must continue what he started. We must reveal the truth and end this criminal network once and for all. Maryam looked out the window at the rising sun over the Gulf, the morning sky painted with hues of hope. "We will do it, for Youssef, for Nasser, and for Salma, my daughter." As the car sped toward Dammam, Maryam felt that the hardest journey had only just begun, a journey of truth and justice, a journey to face the most powerful men in the region and uncover dark secrets buried for decades. But she was no longer afraid. She was now fighting not just for justice, but for her daughter. Maryam and Salma arrived at a quiet suburban house in Dammam, modest but tidy, surrounded by a stone wall overgrown with jasmine. They were greeted by an elderly woman with kind features named Salma, a friend of Ibrahim and the wife of his old companion. "This will be your room," she said warmly, opening a simple room with 2 beds and an old wardrobe. "You will be safe here. No one knows this place." Once settled, Salma left to prepare tea, while Salma took a nap on one of the beds, exhausted from the long day. After a whirlwind of confusion and fear, Maryam sat at the edge of the other bed, gazing at the sleeping child, her daughter, through eyes heavy with unshed tears. How had she not seen it before? The unmistakable resemblance between Salma's eyes and Nasser's. That thoughtful frown, that spark of curiosity. Even her laughter, it was his laughter. The very sound Maryam once loved and thought she had lost forever. "My daughter," she whispered, gently brushing her fingertips against Salma's cheek. 9 years of grief and emptiness. 9 years believing her baby had died before taking her first breath, while all that time she had been alive, growing up just a few miles away. How brave, how selfless Youssef had been. He discovered the truth and risked everything to reunite a mother with her child. He sacrificed his own life for theirs. A soft knock on the door broke through her thoughts. Ibrahim stood there, holding the black bag he had retrieved from the house that morning. "Is she asleep?" he asked quietly, glancing at Salma. Maryam nodded. "Yes, the day has drained her completely." He stepped inside, took the single chair in the room, and placed the bag on the small table between them. "It's time you knew everything." He opened the bag, laying out its contents: photographs, documents, unsent letters, and the small golden earring. Youssef had been collecting this evidence for months. After he discovered who Salma really was, he started digging into the past. He found your old pictures with Nasser among the old papers, and he knew you were Salma's real mother. Maryam picked up one of the photographs, a picture of her and Nasser at Half Moon Bay 10 years ago. She was smiling, innocent, unaware of the storm that would one day shatter her life. "And these?" she asked, pointing at the unsent letters. "They were written by Youssef, letters he never had the courage to give you. He knew the truth might be too dangerous." Her hands trembled as she unfolded the first letter and began to read. "Maryam, the moment I saw you in the fish market, I knew who you were. I had seen your picture with Nasser among the old papers. I knew you were Salma's real mother. I couldn't believe fate had brought us together again after all these years. I never meant to fall in love with you, but once I did, Once I saw your kindness and your strength, I couldn't stop myself. You became my only purpose, to mend this broken family, to bring the daughter back to her mother. But I knew the risks. I knew Tamimi and his partners would never let me do it easily." Tears spilled onto the paper as Maryam whispered, "He truly loved me. It wasn't just a plan." Ibrahim nodded slowly. "Yes, he loved you, and he knew he might have to pay that love with his life. But he was prepared for it, ready to pay the ultimate price as long as you and Salma were safe." Maryam wiped her tears and took the second letter. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it and began to read. "Maryam, if you are reading this, I may already be gone. There are things you need to know. First, Salma is your daughter, Nasser Saleh's daughter. They took her from you at the hospital and told you she had died. This was part of their revenge against Nasser for uncovering part of their plan. Second, Tamimi and his partners are part of a massive criminal network involved not only in illegal fishing, but also drug trafficking and money laundering. All the evidence is in this bag. Third, and this is the hardest, I discovered your father was involved in the early stages of this network, but he tried to pull out, which is why they killed him, making it look like a car accident. If you ever find this letter, know that I loved you with all my heart, and I loved Salma as if she were my own. All I ask is that you stay safe and search for Nasser. He is still alive, hiding in Morocco under an alias. You'll find the contact details in the sealed envelope. If you ever learn the truth, forgive me." Maryam placed the letter on the bed, staring at Ibrahim in disbelief. "Is this true?" she whispered. Ibrahim nodded slowly. "Yes, unfortunately, yes. But your father tried to make amends, tried to leave the network and help the authorities, and that's why they killed him." Maryam fell silent for a moment, trying to absorb the painful truths about her past and her family. Then she took a deep breath and asked, "And this?" pointing to the golden earring. Ibrahim picked up the earring, turning it gently between his fingers. "It was yours as a child. They took it from you when you were at the hospital giving birth to Salma. It was the only proof of her true identity. As for why there were two of them, one was taken from Salma when they handed her to Youssef as collateral, and the other kept by Tamimi. When Youssef discovered the truth, he traced the first earring, making it the final proof that Salma is your daughter." Maryam looked again at Salma, asleep, her heart racing. How could she explain this? How could she tell a 9-year-old that this girl is her real daughter and that the man who raised and loved her was not her biological father? Ibrahim placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You will find the right way. But right now we need to focus on staying alive and exposing this network. That's what Youssef wanted." Suddenly, Salma stirred in her bed, opening her eyes slowly. She sat up, rubbing her eyes with her small hands, then looked at Maryam, Ibrahim, and the papers and photographs scattered between them. "What are you doing?" she asked, curiously lighting up her voice. The two adults exchanged anxious, then astonished glances. Salma got out of bed and picked up a photo, a picture of Maryam and Nasser. "That man," she said slowly, "I saw him in my dreams." "In your dreams?" Maryam asked, her voice trembling. Salma nodded. "Yes, I dream of him." The morning air was crisp as Maryam and Salma walked slowly toward the cemetery. The streets were quiet, only the occasional fisherman's boat horn echoing from the harbor.
Salma held her mother's hand tightly, her small fingers curled around Maryam's. She looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mom, will he recognize me?" she asked softly. Maryam smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Youssef, he knew you. He always did. And he would be proud of you, just as I am." The cemetery appeared at the end of a narrow street, simple and unadorned. A small white stone marked Youssef's grave, surrounded by flowers left by those who remembered him. Maryam knelt beside it, placing the basket of fresh flowers carefully on the ground. Salma copied her, laying her small hands on the cool stone, as if she could feel the warmth of Youssef's presence through it. For a long moment they stood in silence, the soft lapping of the nearby sea mingling with the cries of seagulls. Maryam felt a tear slip down her cheek. She bent closer to whisper to Salma, "Remember, my love, this is where courage and sacrifice live. Youssef, he gave everything so we could be together. And now we carry that with us." After a while, Maryam took Salma by the hand again. "It's time to keep a promise he made," she said, her voice steady yet tender. They walked toward the harbor, the morning sun glinting off the water like shards of gold. Fishermen were beginning their day, their boats rocking gently as nets were prepared. Maryam led Salma to a small pier, where the same old wooden boat Youssef had used for his work remained tied. She knelt beside it, taking out the small golden earring and the letters Youssef had left. "This, all of this, belongs to the story he wanted you to know," she said, handing them to Salma. The little girl held the items carefully, her eyes scanning the letters and the earring. "Did he really do all of this for me?" she whispered. "Yes," Maryam said, wrapping her arms around her daughter. "He risked everything, for you, for us, because love is stronger than fear." As the sun rose higher, painting the harbor in warm golden light, Maryam felt a sense of resolve settle within her. The past had been dark, dangerous, filled with loss and secrets. But here, with Salma at her side, she knew the future held hope. A future she and her daughter would build together. They would never forget him. When they arrived at the cemetery, the place was almost empty, save for a few visitors tending to their loved ones' graves. Maryam and Salma walked slowly among the headstones until they reached Youssef's simple grave. Salma knelt before it, placing a bouquet of jasmine flowers she had chosen especially for this day. "Peace be upon you, Daddy," she whispered. "I've missed you so much." Maryam stood behind her, watching her daughter, her heart tightening with a mix of pain and gratitude. Pain for losing a man she had known only briefly, but who had changed her life forever. Gratitude because he had returned her daughter to her, giving her a second chance at life. "I've been thinking a lot over the past few days," said Salma, looking up at her mother. "Did Daddy die because of me?" A simple question, yet it carried the weight of a lifetime. Maryam knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "No, my love. He didn't die because of you. He died because he was brave, because he was righteous. He faced evil people. He died because he loved us and chose to protect us. But he knew you were my daughter, and they killed him anyway." Salma's eyes widened. "Right?" she asked. Maryam smiled sadly. "He knew you were my daughter, and he wanted to bring us together. He could have stayed silent, lived a normal life, but he chose courage and love. And Salma, that is the greatest lesson he left us." Salma paused, thinking over her mother's words, then pulled a small golden earring from her pocket, the symbol of her true identity. "I want to place this here, with the flowers. Is that okay?" Maryam shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes.
No, my love. That earring isn't for Youssef. It's for you. Youssef kept it to remind you, to remind us of his promise." From her own bag, Maryam took out another matching earring, the one Ibrahim had given her on that stormy night. "These 2 earrings were mine when I was a child. I gave them to you when you were born. They were the only things I could leave with you when they took me from you. Youssef kept one all these years, even when he didn't yet know who you really were." She placed the second earring in Salma's small hand and closed her fingers around it. "Keep them both, as a reminder of 2 brave men, your biological father, Nasser, who had to disappear to protect us, and your father, Youssef, who sacrificed everything to bring us together." Salma melted into her mother's embrace, crying quietly. Her tears were a mix of sorrow and gratitude, her little mind still trying to grasp life's complexities, death, love, and sacrifice.
After several minutes of shared silence, filled with emotion, Maryam stood and took her daughter's hand. "Come on, let's go to the harbor now." They walked together through familiar streets, finally arriving at the harbor where Youssef had moored his boat every day. The place was alive with activity, fishermen unloading their nets, traders bargaining over prices, children playing between the boats. Maryam and Salma stood at the edge of the pier, gazing at the endless sea. The ocean had always been a symbol of life in this region, both harsh and generous, taking and giving, just like life itself. "Maryam, Salma, there's something I want to tell you," Maryam said quietly. "It's something Youssef would have told you if he were still here." Salma turned to her mother, her eyes wide with anticipation. "What is it?" "Just a few days before our wedding, he wrote a note. He never gave it to me, but I found it in his black bag." Maryam reached into the bag and showed her daughter the letters. In the note, Youssef had written that once they married, he would take them on a long journey by boat to Morocco, where your father, Nasser, lived under an alias. He wanted to reunite the whole family. Salma's eyes grew wide with astonishment. "Will we see my real father?" Maryam nodded. "Yes, I spoke with him on the phone last week. He's waiting for us. After 10 years in hiding, he can finally return. The people who were hunting him are now behind bars, thanks to the evidence Youssef collected." Salma sat at the edge of the pier, her legs dangling above the water. "I'm scared. What if he doesn't love me?" Maryam sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "He loves you, Salma. He loved you from the moment he knew you were in my belly. He spoke to you every day before you were born. And when he had to flee, his heart broke because he wouldn't get to see you grow up. He waited his whole life for this moment." Salma gazed at the sun glinting off the rippling water. "Daddy Youssef will always be with me," she said, touching the earrings in her pocket. Maryam smiled, pointing to her daughter's heart. "He will always be there. Every time you choose courage over fear, every time you choose love over hatred, he will be proud of you." Salma took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the weight of the past, the presence of those who sacrificed for her, and the promise of a future filled with hope. Salma took a deep breath, as if trying to hold all the complex emotions in her small chest. Then she looked at her mother with determined eyes. "I'm ready. I want to meet my other father. But Daddy Youssef will always be my dad too." "Of course," Maryam whispered, holding her daughter's hand tightly. "Some people are lucky enough to have one father who loves them. You had 2. They sat there together at the edge of the harbor. The sea continued its eternal movement, carrying and bringing secrets, erasing and writing stories on its sands. The future was uncertain, yet it was a future built on truth and love, not lies and fear. "Daddy lived for this moment until the very end, didn't he?" Salma asked, gazing at the horizon where the sky met the sea. Maryam smiled sadly, brushing away a tear.
Yes, my love, he lived for you and for us until his last breath, and all we can do now is live in a way that would make him proud of us. Against the backdrop of gentle waves, soaring seagulls, and the bright sun, Maryam realized that the promise had truly been fulfilled. Not just Youssef's promise to her and Salma, but her own promise, to seek the truth no matter how painful, and to build a new life from the ashes of the past. The story of Youssef, Maryam, and Salma reminds us that true love sometimes demands the ultimate sacrifice. In a world filled with selfishness and personal gain, we may ask ourselves, are we ready to sacrifice as Youssef did? Do we have the courage to face injustice, even when it costs us everything? Youssef chose the path of truth, fully aware of its heavy price, not for glory, because he knew some things are greater than life itself. Sometimes the truth arrives late, but it arrives nonetheless. Maryam reclaimed her daughter after 9 years of sorrow and loss. Salma discovered that love can come from unexpected places. If you were in Maryam's place, would you forgive the past and move forward? If you were Youssef, would you choose the same difficult path? Always remember, our decisions today shape the story of our tomorrow. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to do what is right despite it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Tales and Secrets. Hit the like button and share this story with someone you love. Tell us in the comments what you think about Youssef's sacrifice and the lessons you've learned from this moving story. New stories and touching tales await you every week, ready to touch your hearts and leave a mark on your life.